Okay, I'm ready to go. Sorry for the delay. I'll edit the title.
Yeah. Hello everyone, my name is Tobi and welcome to the finals, the ESL finals of this Pre-WUDC. I have no preferred gender pronouns. To save up for lost time, I would want the judges to introduce themselves in their appearance on the tab. Let's go. Judges, stating your
hello everyone,
gender.
my name is hello everyone, my name is Emmanuella. My preferred pronouns are she, her. Congratulations on making it this far. I think that alone is enough. Good luck and please take POIs. Thank you.
All right. I'm Kelvin Delali. I'll be a panel for this round. No preferred gender pronoun. Good luck to everyone.
My name is Josh. I'm also a panelist. I prefer masculine pronouns, but I encourage you to refer to the panel as a whole. Best of luck to all the teams.
Okay, I'm also a panelist. My name is Yuya. Okay, I have no gender pronouns. Good luck and congratulations.
All right, thank you, panelists. So this is the format. Before you start your speech, you introduce yourself, stating your preference for POIs and your preferred gender pronouns. So we are not going to waste our time. I think we can get to start, but before we start, would give some housekeeping rules. 1, please don't exceed 7 minutes, 15 seconds. Judges owe no obligations to then put anything to writing. Take POIs, like Emmanuella said. And most importantly, be equity cautious, respect people's gender preference and their preference for POIs. I think let's have an amazing final. Calling the House to order, we welcome the Prime Minister to start the debate. Here.
Just a little check to confirm that I'm audible.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So POIs will be exclusively in the chat, and then unmute yourself to ask me anything. I will take someone. Just give me 5 seconds to start. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So panel, straight into what today's debate is about. I think firstly, let's characterize what this BookScan necessarily looks like, aside from what you get in the info slide. We think that this also contains detailed information, which is for the fact that you're aggregating ratings, means you'll also have access to track history. It means when individuals want to access this history, you are able to provide all of those information at the end of the day. This just looks this just operates like a bank. So when you have individuals and their credit ratings, if you want to source outsource more information as regards to those credit history, and maybe look at specific or niche areas or times where they had maybe those upturns and in maybe how they took loans or how they responded to paying off those loans, you can also have access to information. What this means and how this is analogous to BookScan is that you can also have access to areas in which this book was popular and areas in which this books were less popular. Maybe the books that they have done in the past, the times in which those artists failed and the times in which those artists did rise. And then you can also have an aggregate score of those artists currently now with what you have in status quo. So the second thing is what do we mean in terms of support? We're incredibly happy to ensure that this thing continues to proliferate on our side and ensure that it has licenses to operate in more areas and has access to more information, and it's able to aggregate more scores of individuals and more individuals opt into this. But also note that this doesn't mean that alternatives within society are going to go extinct. There are a couple of alternatives that exist within society, and this is going to respond to the biggest case that you're going to get probably out of the opposition, if they are smart, to argue along the lines of maybe small artists not getting the like recognition. 4 things in terms of the alternatives. 1, you can do things like freelance publishing. 2nd is that you can also do things like advertisement, which currently exists in the status quo. The 3rd thing is that there are other forms of societal discussions that shape what people want in terms of like what people demand in terms of books, like maybe the liberal push that exists within society, and that can always tilt what the narrative within society ultimately looks like. The last thing is that people can alternatively pitch this to publishers at the end of the day. Why is this likely to be the case? Because of personal incentives that exist within society, because also individuals who want to influence their ratings on bookstore, they are likely to do this. But notice that society does not exist in a unidimensional stream. So there are multi-diverse interests of individuals when it comes to books. It means that there are different genres of books and people like are invested in those different genres. Like you have different people prioritizing different things within those genres. So society doesn't have like a unidimensional stream of what they want or what we prefer within like society at the end of the day. What are the discussions of, like on BookScan likely to be like? How is it likely to operate? We can charge a small fee for people who want to use this. Like this is likely to be how like a lot of TV ratings work. But then if it's completely free, we're also happy to support the fact that people, when they click this platform, the individuals who operate this like make a lot of profit. I think that's likely to be the case. Individuals have more incentive to opt in. Why? Because a lot of publishers are going to be using this. We're going to show you why under the first argument. 2 things I'm going to give you in terms of argumentation. 1, I'm going to talk to you about why like the right to information is a principal good. I'm going to do this on 2 levels. And secondly, I'm going to talk about why this is better for authors, and also this is better for like the book stream. If before that, I'll be happy to take a point. It has 1, 3, 2.
Yeah, I think
1.
the problem then
why is it likely to create?
Yeah, I think the problem then is booksellers get to be able to choose, right? How you be able to ensure that the smaller authors, particularly the smaller voice in society, is able to publish their books.
I think in society they're still not able to like have access. Small authors that you talk about on your side are still not able to have access. Why? Because the big authors are the ones able to lobby funding from like publishers. I'm going to exclusively show you why this information caters towards like small authors at the end of the day on our side. So why then is the right to information principle good? 2 things. Know that humans are risk averse, and then as individuals we generally want to avoid risk at the end of the day. But secondly, note the premise of this argument is that information for print like publishers is a legitimate good, irrespective of the choice that they make. So whether or not they choose to invest in small authors or big authors, we don't care. 2 things here. 1, we think that information in terms of being aware to what to invest in, like in terms of like maximizing profit, is good because individuals want to maximize returns on investment and should have a detailed track record on the sustainability of such profit. What then is the comparative? On the other side, if you invest in small authors, there's still no benefit because individuals don't buy into this, like don't buy the books or the works of these individuals, given that they're still not popular on your side. People don't buy their books. You still don't make profit as a publisher. The problem then is that when you don't make profit in your attempt to help this author grow or maybe help them become more popular, you're likely to exploit them because you're helping them with a lot more resources. It means that when profits come, the profit sharing balance is going to be lower. Why then does this change on our side? Because the attribution of success is going to be on the author. You investing on them is investing on them because you know they have a potential for success. You're not just investing on them because you're the one that's like wants to change their career by the virtue of that investment. We reduce exploitation for small authors on our side. The second thing is that there's a legitimacy of information under this argument. We think that even if this individual is like not going to invest going to invest in small authors and they're going to be unprofitable on the other side, we think that they're likely to do this much more because of BookScan. Why? Because you now have accurate information and are able to measure how this individual can be successful by comparing them to other authors and how they have been successful in the past. This means that you can have a better track of ensuring that this individual is able to succeed. The individual who's like a small author and does not have that popularity. Notice that small authors do not have popularity on both sides. On our side, they are able to have the information to help them succeed. That's what is absent on the other side of the house. We give them this, we give publishers this information. But note that even if the guy you're investing in, it doesn't turn up profitable, the loss sharing ratio is going to be balanced. On their side, the loss sharing ratio involves exploitation of these individuals and the kind of works that they are put up, which means that the authors at the end of the day, at the point in time when they are unprofitable on their side, do not get any form of benefit. On our side, we are able to create that balance because we are aware and you have this access to information before you did investing. The importance of this argument is that when you choose to invest, you're fully aware of the consequences, and then there's hence no exploitation by this premise. You understand what you can do to change the outcomes of this individual, and then like all of the outcomes are likely to be better. Books like you can change the outcomes of small authors. Also, you can make like the investments much more profitable. I think this is crucial for investors who choose to put their money into these authors. The second thing, why is this better for the author and then for like innovative writing? Notice that you want to be popular at the end of the day. The only way for you to be popular is if you are able to track your success and measure it in comparison to other authors who have been successful by using BookScan. Notice that this spurs like greater like innovative writing to appeal to consumer interest, but also spurs like consumer incentive when you're able to monitor and track the like how other individuals are able to like get their own base in the kind of genre you're invested in. The comparative then is that on their side, it's only through lobbying that you're able to get investors to invest into publishing. The individuals who are proximate to lobbying are individuals who are already privileged individuals within society. Are the only ones who can get people to invest in them. On our side, we improve information, improve maximization of profits. We also improve outcomes of small authors. Incredibly happy to propose.
We thank that speaker for that fine speech. We'll call on the leader of opposition to start opposition's case in the finals. Here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Please let me finish typing something. Can anyone time me here? Can anyone time me here, like on the screen or something?
Okay. Can any of you
help? I'll be happy.
If there is any panelists that can help us with like share screen timing. No, I think only the host can share screen. I don't think it's possible.
Oh, okay.
Only the host can screen here.
Okay, you let me just move on. Amma.
Diallo.
Yes, please. I'm almost up. Okay. Right. So I'll be starting my speech. No one should badger my speech. Type in the text, please. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. When you support something, it means that you largely shift the relevance towards those things. It means that the relevance that exists in status quo is disproportionately going to be shifted to these ratings. It means that there's a very strong proselytizing narrative that coerces a lot of people into these BookScan ratings. It means that these BookScans rising largely trivializes the relevance of almost all existing alternatives and coerces a lot of people to opt into BookScans. It means that they most likely do not choose the alternatives that like OG preaches to you. But then even if minorities choose those alternatives, because they become easier, they don't get any sensible impact because those alternatives largely lose their relevance to the detriment of the rising of BookScans. We think this is the frame to which the debate should actually happen, because then that's their whole multiplicity frame idea doesn't work. But then even if we assume their best case, the impact that people get from these alternatives is not enough because these things lose their relevance. Opening government largely loses proper characterizations that you ought to prioritize in this debate. We think that these BookScans in of themselves have a way they work. They are based on how you are able to influence polls on social media, the extent at which you are able to use capital to generate an agenda setting power that places you on a higher pedestal. Most of these guys are mostly funded and supported by like majorly instituted like corporations and big firms that OG says are investors, and OG claims use their capital and agenda setting power to protect them and invest in them. Most of these guys mostly create and shape social narratives which are populist in nature. And what every art they mostly promote, they want it to fit into these populist ideologies. It means that what these guys do is to preach specific rhetorics that they need to be accepted within society. It means that non-conformist rhetorics are most likely to get lower BookScan ratings because they do not have capital to generate those agenda setting powers around them. It means that to a larger extent, minorities like in of themselves are largely hurt. It means that it is glaring, and we can all concede that the fact that there is a huge barrier of entry for these minorities within art in of itself. And that's why we think that anything that aggravates this barrier is something that we don't support in principle. I'm going to actually show you why we don't do so. But let me make a sensible debate, right? Why should this debate be mostly premised about minorities and why we should care about minorities art the most? This is because status quo is driving towards an equitable society, and every policy or every idea that is posited must contribute to the organic change that largely embraces minorities. Most of these big corporations that fund this art itself were mostly built on wealth acquired mostly unjustly through either colonization or the exploitation of minorities within society. Hence, it is double jeopardy for them to make the life of these minorities artists worse by increasing the barrier of entry for these guys. We think in principle, opening government loses. This is why the state advances things like affirmative action to ensure those equitable things at any point in time. It means that every single thing that aggravates these inherencies themselves are things that we don't support in principle. How then does this hurt minorities art? We think this does so because it makes minorities art very difficult to break through. Already in status quo, there are a lot of structural inherencies that limit art, and there are being actions to counter them. Supporting this BookScan rating means that you worsen the inherencies tipped against minorities. Most of these arts need breakthrough to advance social change. It looks like they need to penetrate those discourse and generate a discourse to actually encompass minority discussion. It means that at a point where you trivialize the extent at which these things are able to propel minority aggressions and sufferings to generate proper discourse to question, the impact is very glaring because you make things like social justice work very difficult, and you make them you cause a lot of duress. But then you make the breakthrough for these guys largely impossible at that point in time. We think it's very, very bad. What then are the effects on the actors themselves or these authors themselves? We think there's a halo effect and plateauing that occurs. This hurts the actor, the author, because they do not self-improve. Another harm is the volatility of these ratings. It means that their sustainability itself is volatile. It means that at a point where most of these artists prioritize building proper legacies, which are premised on the impact generated by your writing, you then trivialize the extent of legacies that they want to build. And we think this volatility itself is something that is bad. The reason why our counterfactual is better is because when people largely review the aesthetic and cognitive elements of their art in our world, that's when they become better and they offer reviews and criticisms that is able to push them to innovate. OG says, BookScans are going to cause us to elevate. These guys to innovate. These guys do not question the content and all those stuff of your book, because once you have a higher BookScan which you can tip towards your site, it is termed as good. It means that they are unable to give these guys proper reviews for them to ensure that they make themselves better at any point in time. We think it's something that is bad. The third extension is on an economic level. We think at a point where books can become the norm, means that these things are most likely going to be very expensive because of the ratings around it and a lot of capital that is put into this thing to generate the rating. It means that you most likely create a barrier of accessibility, mostly for these minorities. These ratings have a very strong coercive power that drives a lot of demand and raises the prices. It means that the rich mostly get this at the detriment of the poor. But most of the inherent problems and the lessons that most of these guys ought to prioritize from this pop culture are mostly beneficial to the poor. We lose those things like social activism and all this stuff. But secondly, we think the rich also have a lot of luxury as compared to the poor in status quo. And most of the things that the poor mostly depend on are most of these pop cultures. At a point where you make accessibility very difficult, it looks like you deny them all these forms of escapism and all those stuff, and you subjugate them to a world of perpetual harm and double jeopardy. Think something that is bad. But how does this hurt the art community itself? We think the only reason why people prioritized art and what made art very unique is the extent of exclusive cognitive and aesthetic value that was very unique to them and distinguished them from every other niche in society. At a point where the focus is shifted to the clout around your work and not the active propagation and appreciation of those intrinsic values of your art, these books and movies seek to portray, you taint the fabric and lose the caveat that makes these art communities unique. We reject this BookScan in principle because since it stains the uniqueness of art community, It threatens their sustainability within the society because they become trivialized. This is a very legitimate self-defense mechanism because we want to protect our unique caveat at any point in time. What is our counterfactual? It's very simple. We support a world where artists prioritize the cognitive and aesthetic value of their work. Secondly, we support a world where writers focus on actually writing to cause and generate social change and proper discourse, and also caring about their legacies and the institutionalization of their legacies. We think these things are too volatile for these guys to invest in. It's not been so proud to oppose.
We thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that, for the Leader of Opposition for that speech. Welcome the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, please just give me a moment. Let me just.
All right.
So POI is in the text space. At no point should you badger. I would appreciate that. I'll prioritize one for closing so we can have a more diagonal engagement. But okay, I'll be starting in. Let me just say it one more time. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Mr. Speaker, there's a need for us to firstly clarify the sort of counterfactual that Leader of Opposition brings in this, because it's quite vague. I'm wondering how you guys will put it in your notebook at the end of the day, because what they said is, oh, we prioritize the aesthetic value and cognitive value of writers. That's to say they should just release their content and they are able to get criticisms within the mainstream society. It's kind of vague, right? But firstly, how is it mutually exclusive? The function of this particular BookScan is to ensure that there's an aggregated rating from all of the works you have done. So when these particular people put their aesthetic value on their side of the house, we are able to maximize it better on our side of the house because all of those particular criticisms and the popularity that their book, those aesthetic values that they talk about, all of those things that they gain, that popularity is added up and used to rank them at the end of the day. I really do not understand what they mean by that, right? What platform exactly is the counterfactual on their side of the house? Because our side of the house is a form of platform. There's really nothing open opposition has said, right? But there's this other thing that they talked about. Like they said, oh, well, the problem with our side is that we tilt the relevance of status quo because we trivialize status quo because people are being coerced to this particular new thing, right? I find that very vague again. So what are the things in status quo, right? And how are they being tilted? How are people being coerced into this particular thing at the end of the day? Note that the alternative that my partner talked to you about is to show that there are other places where people can sell their books and where publishers can see the ratings at the end of the day. But what BookScan does is to aggregate all of those particular ratings into one particular platform, and there'll be more easy accessibility to those particular informations in and of itself. The problem, however, is that all of these alternatives exist, right? I don't see how we shift that particular relevance on our side of the house. It's really still unclear what they mean. But secondly, they say, oh, books can use capital to shape social narrative. This is very ridiculous, right? Notice that the way the particular ratings from BookScan work is gotten on the basis of the sellout of all of these particular authors in and of itself. So all of those particular books that you have written, all of the sellouts that you have made at the end of the day, those are the aggregation of those particular ratings. All of those things are what are aggregated to form the ratings on BookScan. We don't see how they shape narrative at the end of the day. What they do is to amplify the popularity of these particular individuals who have put in the hard work in and of themselves, and people are seeing it at the end of the day, so that publishers will see that these are the people that the people want, these are the books that the people want to read. Let's invest in this thing at the end of the day. This seems to be their biggest case, the idea about minorities. And when you hear Johnson argue this, you would think it's something that is really way out of the box. But it's really very funny because the impact they talk about here is that books can aggravate inequalities. The first question you need to ask them is, who are the minorities they are talking about within this debate? Right? What is the minority book they are talking about within this debate? Because last time I checked, and from my partner's speech, he showed you about how the liberal push that like shapes society within status quo is one that kind of prioritizes the sort of books that are popular within status quo. And when you look at the liberal push, it is one that favors the minority in and of itself. Notice that because society is now more focused on issues about minorities in and minority rights, right? Societal narrative is one that makes their book go sell out. Ask Chimamanda Ngozi about all her books at the end of the day about the African woman, the African female child, right? All of these particular things are the new sort of wave, right? That's why African books are gaining traction even overseas, right? So if their problem is minority, right, we literally have taken care of it from our side of the house. I want to do like 4 things in comparative to end my speech. The first thing I want to talk about is on small authors at the end of the day. Notice that we think that this particular alternative that my partner talked about that exists shows you that even if publishers do not like invest in you because of the fact that you are low on rating, there are still multiple ways for you to sell your work. One, there are multiple open platforms like freelancing to which you get traction. You have Light Book Reader, you have all of this, etc., etc. You have the opportunity to advertise and sell on things like Facebook, etc., etc. Like Amazon, you can even sell your books on Amazon, that if your book is very exquisite in and of itself, right? But thirdly, there are other publishers who are not risk averse and like to invest in potential or other types of like writing in and of itself, right? So notice that what we are just doing exclusively on our side is giving more access to information for publishers to use, right? It's still their choice whether or not they want to like invest in this particular sort or in the like whether in small authors or big authors and so. But then the fourth thing you need to understand under this particular comparative is that it's not that their side of the house, right? Where like it's not that their side of the house is just so merciful to small authors and themselves, because small authors still have to struggle on their side of the house, because the best thing they can talk about is for you to go and lobby, like to go and try to lobby and pitch your book directly to this particular publishers and themselves. However, our side of the house, like, make it better for the truly talented writer to be able to be recognized. Why? Because when your progress is steady, your ratings increases, right? When you continue to write like freelance, to write on all of these other platforms, BookScan aggregate all of these particular improvements that you do and increase your ratings. So that particular steady increase shows that necessarily we are able to get some sort of improvement for all of these particular small writers, that small authors that they want to talk about on their side of theirs. I think the comparative is more tedious and it's more based on like proximate relationship, where probably you have access to like investors, and in and of itself it's even not mutually exclusive. Small writers in our world can still go there. What's your POI? Quickly.
So you said that small authors will still suffer because of lobbying, but at the same time you talk about liberal push. Which one is it, right? How does it translate to minority author getting higher rating and thus more income?
Literally, panel, I said that the work of this particular like minority authors, notice that small authors are not necessarily minority authors. Chimamanda Ngozi is not a small time author, right? She's a minority, she's a minority person that writes books. That makes her a minority author within the characterization from opening opposition. That's the difference here. We are talking about the small author in that particular first comparative. The last thing I want to talk about on comparative is on book publishers. We think they need that particular access to information because they're legitimate, good in themselves. In status quo, publishers have to watch out for multiple platforms, which is tedious, but then secondly, it doesn't maximize their risk averseness because they're unable to find the most profitable individual. Since many platforms exist in themselves, they're unable to aggregate those particular preferences. Our side have that holistic form of access to information. Competition is maximized on our side of the house because as a writer, when you see other writers improving their ratings, you are likely going to want to like compete more on that particular platform at the end of the day, and it overall increases the consumption rating by the consumers and allow for these particular individuals have access to more money and be adequately rewarded. We are very, very proud to stand for authors.
We thank the Deputy Prime Minister for a fine speech. We'll call on the Deputy Leader of Opposition to end the debate for the finals for the opening half. Here.
Yeah, hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So, I won't be looking at the text space, and if you have a POI, you can unmute and ask. but I'm sure my timing will be on the text space. So on mute in my 5th minute, I would most likely prioritize taking closing governments, right? So just give me some seconds. All right. So I'm starting my speech in I'm starting
okay.
my speech. I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So the foundation that builds and sustains society demands that societal norms, established rules, must allow for continuity, especially in recognition of people who have the greatest potential to extend that continuity within any space. So even within art, even though we think it's good to prioritize things like authenticity, which could be based on historical track records, we think it is also good to allow for people who are upcoming within that particular space to thrive. Opening government feels that minorities would be better off on their side, and they little the impact of minority engagement because their responses are so weak. I'm going to show you why that is something that is important and you need to prioritize it. Let's specifically talk about the clashes that have existed in the opening half thus far, how we win on them, and in extension, would see the contributions from the closing half. The first is on the alternative. Opening government says there are a couple of alternatives that exist on our world, things like freelancing, putting your works out in Facebook, and all those things. We agree that that is true, but there are a couple of reasons why that alternative is significantly relevant, but the impact they want you to accept does not really exist. There are 2 reasons for this. One, the gross support for BookScan and what they propose, all these things trivializes the potential for the alternatives to thrive. But can only thrive when you have the possibility or the assurance that you can come back into the market system, right? Into the BookScan mechanisms, the metrics for which it would exist and give you relevance. But more importantly, right, BookScans on their word means that these guys would prioritize the ratings and not the cognitive or the aesthetic value, which is most likely premised on the extent of glaring impacts for which society established. That in and of itself is failed for the art side, which in itself should contribute to the growth of these books. Because you say that the profitability of an author is most likely going to be based on sales and historical records or popularity of their previous works. Why is this not in itself a justified thing to do? This is in extension the clash on minority. Listen, BookScan numbers could have powerful impact on whether or not a book is acquired in the first place. Why? Because the publishers have to take these numbers as an indication of the new book's potential success. This harms society in 3 ways. One, poor recent numbers, right, may put a stain on a publisher's enthusiasm to sign up for new works. It means that authors who have historical long track record of success rate would fall into a marginal status loss with a single recent failure in status quo, a single recent sales failure. Because what their word does is that you overshadow their history of success, which is posed with the validation from the BookScan. You are less likely going to see these guys survive within that framework. But secondly, it can reduce the rate at which new authors, failed authors, or upcoming authors can come up because this overshadows other metrics, even the alternatives that OG talks about, because when we support it, it's going to be prioritized, and the mechanism to enforce this in society could be gross. What it means is because they also think that the author is now going to be a money magnet. So even if it's bad, even if the work does not really make sense, as long as you can contribute to the numbers on historical records and all those things, people would buy them and your publishing business would be made popular. We don't think it makes sense. But thirdly, and very importantly, it also means that seemingly successful authors can just get their mediocre works published, works that do not necessarily have so much relevance, because now there is a bias that is created because you have the records. We say in status quo, what we do prioritize from our side is creativity. We don't want publishers to be fixated on the records, because manipulations could exist to favor your side in a particular way. Look at this example and how it weighs up. Alternatives like free markets, like NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and the rest of them who do not prioritize ratings, the reason why minorities can thrive and the reasons why minority can sell their art for as much as $6,000 in the NFTs market is because you don't in any way place a limit with respect to your history. That is why these guys are most likely going to thrive within that space. When you create a caveat or mechanisms for rating, which is what these guys do with a BookScan, you are more likely going to make these things lose their impact and relevance to thrive. What you get from the leader of opposition is that the reasons why BookScans and the reasons why you have to go with our word, which is status quo, is that we place value on the glaring impacts, the impacts that exist with all those things that exist in status quo on our side. We think this is mostly important. But lastly, and very importantly, see the problem with OG is that they largely ignore how we prove to them that the improvement of the rating is mostly not based on the content of your work, but by how much capacity you have to tip the polls to your side. There is no improvement in their word, and they do not give any answer to that unimproved mechanisms that exist. We think closing government needs to do better to establish this framework. At the end of the day, their idea on right to access of information still exists on our side. Opening government already makes a concession that small authors would not succeed in either sides of the house. We say, even if that is true, their side is worse off, because there is now a caveat that justifies the extent to which people can do this and all those type of things in their world. We don't think it makes sense. Lastly, we think society and even movie settings get most of their inspirations from books. And this is important because when you have authors who have high ratings and who have a higher chances of records, it means these movies are most likely going to also prioritize getting inspiration from all these guys. We prefer a world where minorities can be able to thrive. People who do not have the records, people who do not have the history, we allow them to thrive in society because we don't need the BookScan. Whereas in their world, they allow for even mediocre authors in themselves that have been successful to come into the society. Lastly, and very importantly, you need to understand that their case of access cannot make sense because it gives access and it hurts minorities, entrenches oppression, systematic inherence, and would always be rejected in society. We are very, very happy to win the finals from OO.
We thank that speaker for that fine speech. With that, we've come to the end of the debate. For the opening half, we call on the member of government to start the debate for the closing half, and we employ the host to be around so we can pause the record once the MG finish their speech. All right, member of government, ready when you have.
And please, I'm audible.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'll take QIs in the chat. And sure. Okay, so let me time myself here, sorry. Okay, so starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The reason why opening opposition loses today's debate is very, very simple. I'll spend like a minute or two on that. One, they say that, oh, things like supporting such things will lose its relevance. And now we believe that today's debate is not necessarily a support of a rise debate. So they do not clearly share which relevance it moves away from. But if you try to get a sort of like understanding of what relevance it moves away from, if they say it moves away from arts, we are going to show you why that is like necessarily symmetric, and even on their side is worse. One, they say, oh, on our side, it just becomes about the rating, and big publishers or big writers were able to put out trash and it still be like good. What they don't understand from the debate, and there's a lot of mechanization that is separated from our opening. One, we show you that in the debate or from the Infoslide, it says that it is based on sales history and popularity. So if an author produces trash and it comes out and people do not buy, the rating dwindles. Like, it's so akin to credit score rating. So if you continuously have bad credit on accumulated in your credit card, the rating will drop. And that's something they have to understand in today's debate. But secondly, if they say that, oh, then it's like bad work, when they say like, if work is bad, more people won't buy it. It's a simple supply and demand analysis that you have to understand. So majority of the time, even in status quo, even big artists, when they publish all of these things such as like, because of the society and all of these things, one, they will not be able to sell majority of their books, meaning that it hurts their rating, and that's something that we necessarily want on our side. But secondly, they talk about minorities and all of this is like, we're tackling all of this. They said minorities, one, we believe that like things like cancel culture, things like the way society is now, we believe that a lot of artists are careful about whatever they bring out. So if it's much more on racism and misogyny and it gets published, they will be attacked. What it means is that the rating will necessarily reduce on that side. That's something that's very, very important to understand. But what they don't want to accept is that a lot of the harms that they identify is symmetric on their side. So when it comes to influence, power, agenda setting, and all of these things, why is it bad on their side? Let's compare. On our side, we see that people are able to access their books through a certain standard based on sales and popularity. How is sales and popularity generated? Because when the books are good, when art is good, when whatever art the books they publish out, if it is good, then mean it increases sales and increases popularity. There is no way you can tell me that Harry Potter is not necessarily good, because the sales and the numbers even justify some of these things. It's even one of the ways where we even rate movies, like the number of sales it made and all of those things. Music in of itself too. What it looks like on their side is that one, people or the big artists, one, are already being controlled by a lot of these publishing firms. So the issue about agenda setting and all of this is much more existent on their side. But on our side, how are we able to avoid some of these things? Is because then if an author has like a better credit rating, meaning the author can necessarily go solo. Because if people want to read books and read art, then meaning that they will now have to look at things like the rating and all of this, which gives them a fair idea of the type of author he is. Because obviously, if someone is, as I said earlier, someone is inputting like good things, it generates good things, it generates like better outcome, which is sales history and popularity. That's something you have to understand. On their side, there's more agenda setting on the side, because then most of these writers are the whims and caprices of most of these like publishing houses. So that's how control necessarily exists on their side. That's very important. What do we bring to you in today's game? We say that popularity can be a selling point for upcoming artists. Why do we do that? We say that one, then we get to democratize popularity. Why is that easy? So then, like, popularity cuts across like necessarily a lot of demographics. So that's why I'm in Ghana and the book was released in the UK, Harry Potter. I know that book is popular, and meaning that I'm able to read that book and it is good. What it means is that the data, the BookScan is just a data that necessarily like shows us how popular things is, and I've already shown you how popularity is generated. What opposition have to do in today's debate is to defend why this agency or this data agency should not exist in the first place. Because if they say that they do not support it, meaning that they outright do not want it to exist, that's something that they have to understand and like sort of engage in today's debate. That's what opening opposition didn't do. A lot of things such as structural barriers and things, I believe that like do not necessarily exist in today's debate. That's very important. But there's a concession in the whole debate. That debate, like that publishers are business people, and profitability is something that you already check. What we do on our side is that we have a better metric to check most of these things. So like to have a better metric to check all of these things and a precise method, what it does for our side and what sort of benefit it gives us is that one, they are much more like people are much, when you say this BookScan is necessarily universal, what it does is that the popularity cuts across. So then most of like, when the popularity cuts across, most of the people in the West will be able to like understand the sort of books that are much more, or the sort of genres in books that are much more popular in countries like Ghana, Nigeria. The reason why opposition arguments about minority is rather counterintuitive is because most of the people in the West rather hate minorities because they do not know what necessarily goes on here and how, like, what sort of books they necessarily enjoy and what sort of books that they necessarily want in that instance. Let me take opinion opposition before I continue.
So, Martin,
yes.
Mascot tells you that they are equally very universal alternatives that do not depend on your history and the coagulation of your history. And that's what we defend, and they prioritize your cognitive and aesthetic value. Defend the comparative and why we shouldn't support it. Don't come and be ridiculous in the debate.
So the thing about it is that there are other things that are also universal. Like this is the part where we are different from our opinion. We tell you that one, even though majority of these things are like most of the things we do, like the BookScan is universal. Comparing to yours, one, we're able to see clear figures and numbers, not necessarily show us what is like very popular and all of this things. We show you the external benefit. But secondly, on their side, when they talk about most of these popular things, they say that, oh, like it helps us because like most of these are also popular, so let's replace them. You do not engage why on the comparative, why we should take what you already exists on your side over what what you are trying to bring out on our side. That's very important. Why does it help small actors? One, we believe that when small artists or new artists see things like romance selling out in Ghana, like romance books selling out in Ghana, they are most likely going to do romance book because like that is the thing you have to understand about most artists, because they're also people, they're also business people, they also have to make money. So then most of these things, like most of the things that they also write is supposed to generate money for them. What we do on our side is that we're able to give them a better metric of gauging what is popular in a lot of demographics and a lot of countries, a lot of places where they can be able to maximize. So we have things like people, like Asian people being rated, Africans also being rated. That is the scope that we necessarily cover on our side of the debate. Yeah, that is also very, very important in today's debate. Open opposition falls out fairly a lot, and Lois will do more on that. Panel, what you have to understand from our speech is that one, when people are necessarily going to buy a lot of books, they look at things like review and all of this. Those things still exist in our world. What we have on our side is something that gauges popularity and helps people and artists to sell more books. Proud creation government.
We thank that speaker for that fine speech, and we ask the host to post the record. Sweep, ready when you are.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you can be heard.
Okay, so I will not be looking at the text space, so if you could kindly unmute and then ask for a POI or indicate whether I'll take you or not. So I begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel. The reason that my member is the most relevant person in this debate is because he tells you how the social credit system is going to look like. Given that the audience of an author are the readers and the ability of an author to actualize is dependent on the recognition given to them by society, it means that at every single point in time, right, sales popularity and history, which is like the premise of the credit system, is only premised on the feedback that readers give. It means that regardless of how rich you are, regardless of how popular or influential you are, it does not necessarily necessitate the recognition that your work would get. We think then it creates an equitable basis for like accessibility of every single kind of author to garner the support they can from publishers. Why is this important? It means then what runs on the creation of barriers of entry for the poor and marginalized does not happen in our world. Why? Because then publishers are not looking at how influential or how rich you are. They are just basing whether they will publish your book based on like your sales history and sales popularity. Sales history and sales popularity is dependent on the readers. If readers like if readers agree, or if readers get that cognitive benefits that they want to get from reading your book, it would then necessitate giving you good like credit rating. We do not think that like credit rating is based on how rich you are, because how rich you are does not influence the receptivity that readers get from your book. We think therefore then on Ops World, creation of barriers of entry is what happens on Ops World. How? Because readers would not have like the ability to like determine for themselves whether or not they agree with or whether or not they like a particular author's creation or not. It means publishers are looking at arbitrary factors like wealth. They're looking at arbitrary factors like who your friends are, like the propensity of you to get like the profits that they want. Because notice, publishers are profit incentivized. Then it lies on them to determine or provide the metric for determining whether or not they want to publish your book. It then means that people are more susceptible to like things like marginalization, to things like domination, because a particular publishing company would not want to like publish a book of a Black author, or would not want to bring out a book based on rape and all of that. We think therefore barriers of entry are more existent on ops side of the world, particularly OO, because we get this kind of analysis from them. Secondly, then on like they tell you about how there's prevention of discourse on our side of the world. We think this is largely false, because comparatively here the audience is the one being the determining and deciding factor for whether your book should be popular and whether like a publisher would want to publish your book. It means therefore then that like a discourse is better created between the audience and between publishing companies and between the authors themselves. On stakeholder analysis, therefore there's like a creation of like discourse between the kinds of books that the audience wants to read and the kinds of books that the author would want to publish. We think it is like legitimate for this kind of discourse to happen, because given that the audience are the people, like the readers are the audience of the author, and the ability of an author to self-actualize, it therefore lies on the people who are the receiving end of your work and who are the reason for which you are like profiting and the reason for which you are like becoming well off. It means that they become a legitimate actor to determine whether or not they want your books to like continue to be successful, right? We think then on discourse we win, because what you get from OO is that discourse is prevented on our side of the world, because the publishers are looking, authors are going to go in line with what society thinks, and then like they'll conform with societal norms and the like. We think this is not particularly exclusive to either side, because even in status quo, you'd realize that because authors want to continue to like profit from the books they make, they are more incentivized to write in line with what people would want to read. Therefore, like they cannot argue on the lines of prevention of self-improvement. They cannot argue on the lines of prevention of like improvement, and then on preventing people from wanting to publish, from wanting to like write what they want to write. It's not like very exclusive to their world, and we show how it is like marginally better on our side. Thirdly, the third biggest argumentation we get is about the volatility of the rating system. We think that even if this is true, this is a concession we are willing to make, because given that the authors exist and they are profiting off the readers based on how the readers buying their books and the like, we think on the principle of reciprocity, right? It is only right, it is only right that readers become the determining factor for the ability of an author to actualize, right? Now, what do you get from CO? CO says their world is better because their metric is based on influence, and we think influence is directly linked to wealth. So everything they talk about cannot be like exclusive to them, right? Because they argue that if you are based on like if your rating system or if how well off you are is based on influence, then it means that it's a better system. We think this is false, because influence directly linked to wealth, influence is directly linked to popularity, influence is directly linked to who you know. We think it is problematic to limit the ability of every single author to actualize based on how well off and who you know within the publishing system. We think like it is problematic, because then it limits people who do not have enough wealth, it limits people who do not have enough like popularity from being able to actualize. We think, therefore, on the metric of influence, CEO's world becomes more problematic because influence is based off on arbitrary factors like you being rich, like where you are located, like who your friends are and how powerful they are. We think then it is very problematic in CEO's world. The impact of CEO's world is puppeteering of the publishing company. We think this is very problematic because then it means that how influential you are dictates for the publishers on whether or not they want to publish your books. Rather, on our side of the world, what you create is an equitable accessibility mechanism for every single type of author to be able to actualize, because it's not based on how influential you are. It's based on the receptivity of your books by the audience. The audience is the determining factor for your ability to succeed. We think this is more legitimate because given that you are profiting off people buying your books, it then becomes necessary, or they become the legitimate actor for deciding what they want to read, for deciding whether or not your books give them the cognitive benefits that people want to get when they read books, right? Then what you get from, and why we differ from our opening. Our opening says that there are other factors for smaller groups to be able to thrive, to be able to succeed. And given that their sort of framing is only beneficial, is more beneficial to the rich artists, then it means that the smaller artists will then continue to have to be disadvantaged. Then we do not think that this is a right enough mechanism. We tell you that every single person benefits on our side of the world because you are not limiting people based off how small they are. Every single person, regardless of how influential you are, regardless of how wealthy or not you are, regardless of who you are acquainted with, based on the receptivity that the audience gets because of the books you have created, every single person has an opportunity to thrive. Now, lastly, time. Is it time?
Yes, 8 minutes.
Oh, so sorry. I was in the Canada. Yeah, sorry. Proud to win.
We think that speaker after that fine speech. I would love the OC to